Thank you very much. Good morning, Jaipur. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
I
we
see
can.
a show of hands if people can. Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. Anna Seema, very good to see you. Um, I must say that I'm much older than the introduction suggests there. So 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago, I was working in a large corporate, and I was running a division this was the beginning of the internet. So I had a number of e-commerce and internet businesses, and I was told by the CEO to either fix them or kill them or sell them. They were sort of going nowhere, and we had to make a decision. And it was a portfolio of about 10. And we had very deep pockets. So I did what organizations with very deep pockets do. I got McKinsey, I went to all the conferences, I got all the right agencies, and they told us what we had to do. We did all of it, nothing worked. And I went to a conference in San Francisco once, and there was a guy on stage, Eric Ries, Ries. If you haven't read his book, I highly recommend it. Lean Startup. And he spoke about this recipe that Sima and I are talking about today. I came back from that conference, and the only thing I took away from that conference was the following, was to speak to customers. I literally, when I came back from a conference, started phoning our customers. What I heard from our customers was very different from what I'd heard from the McKinsey consultants and all the agencies. I started doing that and suddenly started seeing the results. The results were so good that the accountants had to launch an investigation because they were convinced that something was wrong. This can't be right. The performance can't be this good. Anyway, so that's just to share with you just how old I am really, and now I'll start with the actual presentation. So I hope you can see that. I assume you can see that. My business, OptiPhoenix, the entire industry exists around this question here. I assume that's why many of you are in this room. Is this objective, this question? How do we increase our conversion rate? Please increase the conversion rate. Let's increase, whatever form it takes. And I think it doesn't help us very much. I think it's the wrong approach. I think it's entirely lopsided. I think it's very difficult to win if you come at it from this approach, and I'll explain a little bit why. So the problem, of course, is that we look at analytics, we look at our marketing dashboards, we see all these beautiful graphs, and we forget that those graphs, something like conversion rate, but you could look at revenue or anything, is the outcome of human behavior, right? So conversion rate itself, that graph, that metric, is the outcome of whether somebody bought or they didn't buy. Of course, that sounds obvious, but we forget it when we look at analytics, we look at conversion rate, we talk about conversion rate. It's as though it's divorced from that thing which is so obvious, that it is a reflection of human behavior. Did somebody buy or not? And it goes much further than that. For somebody to buy, they have to make the decision. Yeah, I'll buy this. And we know from looking at conversion rates that most people don't get to that point. And it goes even deeper than that. Before a consumer says, yes, I'll buy this, there's got to be the realization, and that's not in the head. That's in the mind, that's in the heart, it's somewhere else. I want this, I need this. What we tend to do as marketers, and it doesn't help us at all, is we look at the left side of this picture. We look at the analytics. We look at the metrics. We forget the right side of this image, which is actually the only thing that matters, because that is what is going to determine the metric you care about. You cannot change conversion rate. It is what it is. You're looking in the rear view mirror. It has already happened. What you can change is the behavior and the human psychology, the mindset that eventually determine whether somebody buys or not. So that's a critical point. And I want to show you some of the, you'll recognize this. If you ignore that, and I see this every day, this happens in our industry. It happens even in my business. So you look at a page like this, and it doesn't matter what it is, but there's a nice expensive piece of furniture. And you look at this page and you go, well, how do we improve our conversion rate? That question that we started with. And we could come up with a range of things. Like if we talk about this for 1 minute, we'll have a dozen options. And we look at maybe heat maps, and we look at scroll maps, and we look at session recordings, and we look at analytics, and we'll come up with even more ideas. And maybe one of them, and this is a real example, and I see this a lot, is, well, let's move the add to cart button above the fold. So this is a very common, what's called a best practice, like a heuristic rule of thumb in CRO. I see it a lot. And if you ask ChatGPT or Claude for advice on how to improve your page, this is the kind of thing that Claude or ChatGPT will say to you. Now let's think this through. What has to be true for this tactic to work? If you think about that logic, if you interrogate that logic, what has to be true for a tactic like this to work, is that somebody really wants to spend £2,000, I think it's about 250,000 rupees, on a cabinet, but they just can't find the button. I do not believe that. I think if somebody wants to spend that amount of money on a cabinet, they will find the button. So I don't buy that logic unless there's some evidence behind it. That's just one example. This is what I call, and what I don't like, moving stuff around the page. And I do not want to see CRO that moves stuff around the page. Out of the entire universe that comes to your website, this gray circle there is a tiny, tiny portion who will buy from you no matter what. They will crawl over broken glass to buy from you. Maybe they love your brand, maybe the price is right, you've got a sale, it doesn't matter what. They will buy from you. We don't really care about them. They're going to buy anyway. The portion that we really, and of course, that, as you can see the relationship there, we know this, most people won't buy it. But there is another bubble, another small population. They might buy if you said the right things, if the stars were aligned. They're sort of on the edge. They're not buying yet. They don't show up in your conversion rate because they haven't bought. But they might. It depends. And what does it depend on? Things like this. They arrive on your page, on your site, and they go, I don't get it. So this typically is when people write headlines, or they use AI or fluffy language, things that sounds nice in a boardroom, but really to the consumer it means nothing. I don't get it. I don't quite understand it. Or I don't believe it. I get it, but I don't believe it. Like the claims you make sound wonderful, but I'm not sure it's true. And then the last one, there's more, but you recognize these. All of us as consumers recognize this. You go, well, I get it. I believe it. I'm just not sure it's for me. Or maybe I have to speak with my partner. These are the questions that sit in the mind of the consumer that get in the way of them buying. And that's the real thing we've got to solve. It's not moving stuff around the page. It's not moving buttons around. It's not making things bigger. It's this. This is what we have to solve in order to see real impact. So here's a quick example from our work. Citizen M is a hotel chain. They've now been bought by Marriott. They've got about 40, 50 hotels around the world. And it's this is the website, their homepage initially, and it says, hotels for the wise, not the wealthy. Now, if you know Citizen M and you've stayed there before, this doesn't matter to you because you know what it's like, you know it's a great hotel, you know it's your vibe, it's, you'll crawl over broken glass. But if you've never been in a hotel before, this doesn't really tell you anything, right? You've got nothing to go on. And so we, for example, many of the things that we did, one is called the 5-second test, where you show this website, this page to people for 5 seconds. And then after 5 seconds, you ask them, tell me what this is about. And here are some of the responses we got. And all the responses were the same. It looks like it's comfy hotel, maybe comfy beds. So maybe they sell beds. Somebody else says it looks like it's an Airbnb. So we get this picture of people looking at this and not really knowing what it is, right? So it's that I don't quite get it. Here's the test that we ran, and I'll read that with you because the words matter. Super central location, huge bed, and in brackets, and your hotel room is iPad controlled. And then you've got a picture, not of a bed, but of a scene from a room. Why? Because when we spoke to people, love Citizen M, who used to stay there all the time, who are advocates of it, when we look at forums, when we look at the reviews, we look at Reddit, we look at what people say, these are the actual words. So super central location, it's a phrase that actually is used. And so this is, there were many tests around this, but this blew that picture at the top out of the water. Much higher booking rate. Here's an interesting one. It is an air purifier. I love working in this industry or any industry where there's a little bit of a tension in the mind of the consumer where it feels a little bit like a gimmick. It feels like a scam, like this thing is probably not going to work, but you're going to buy it anyway, hoping that it'll work. So this is a brand. I've done work with this brand. This is Blue Air. I think they're reasonably big in India as well. We work with another brand of air purifier. Unfortunately, I don't have permission to mention that case study, but I'll use this as an example. So you arrive on this page. This is a big brand. They've got a big marketing department. You would assume they're doing everything right. If I start working on this, how do I get into the mind of the consumer? How do I understand, well, what are those questions? One place, and I'll give you 3 tips today, is Reddit answers. This is the place where I start with anything. And Reddit, I'm sure you know, but I'll tell you anyway, it's like some people call it the window of the internet. It's these communities, these subreddits, little threads that are communities about anything and everything on the internet. And so there are subreddits for air purifiers, many of them. There are subreddits for everything. And it's because it's consumers, it's ordinary people just chatting. It's like a discussion board, just never ending. You can really get a sense, you can tap into the consumer mindset. And so for me, that's a great place to start because I want to be in the head of the consumer where the decision is made. And so here are some questions I typed in. I'll give you a list of questions shortly that you can use yourself. What common situations led to people start looking for an air purifier? And here are some of we won't go into detail, but here are some of the things that Reddit told me. Allergy symptoms. They talk about a runny nose. And there are some others as well. I'm gonna move on. Because I asked the same thing to Perplexity Pro. So Perplexity, I'm sure you know, is an AI search engine, I think is the best way to describe it. And instead of like Google, which gives you a list of blue links, and you've got to go and look for the answer yourself, Perplexity gives you, it's an answer engine, really. So it uses AI to consolidate everything that it finds. So I gave it a list of questions as well. I use deep research, and so that takes it into Reddit, it takes it into Facebook, it takes it into reviews, it takes it deep into the internet, and it tells me what consumers are saying. And again, I won't go through all the detail with you, but I will pull out some of the things that have come out from, so far we spent 5 minutes on it, but people are talking about bad allergy. They're talking about congestion, sneezing, itchy, so really specific. Then they're talking about pet dander. The pet hairs flying around the room. They're talking about allergies, asthma. They're talking about pet odor. So these are the specific things. That's what's in the mind of the consumer when they land on that page that we looked at. So there's a list of questions, and if you want the complete list, I'm not going to spend any time going through it here, but it's there if you want to grab it. But just to mention maybe 2 or 3, the kind of questions that I recommend you ask of Reddit answers, you ask of Perplexity, and you can even use something like Gemini Deep Research or ChatGPT Deep Research. When you do use those services, I would just guide it. I would tell it to ignore any marketing material and go directly to reviews, discussion forums, directed to use only consumer knowledge, only consumer insights. And the one question that I love, that I always include, is what specific words or phrases do people use when they talk about this problem? So I ask about the problem that brings them to the solution. So air purifier, what is it that makes people want to buy an air purifier? And then also I ask about the solution type. So air purifier. Let's move on. The other one I use is customer reviews. And so in this case, because they're not a client, I don't have their customer reviews, but I scraped it off the internet. It's very easy to do that. So you will have your customer reviews, but you also should use your competitor customer reviews, because what you're trying to get is not really the beautiful things or the nasty things they say about the product. You're trying to understand what is it that made them buy, what we call the purchase triggers. What are the things that what are the desired outcomes? What are the things that they imagined they would achieve when they considered buying this? What are the anxieties? What were the fears? What were the questions in their mind that they had before buying this? All of that you can get from reviews. Now, I use a very extensive process, but there's a GPT, a custom GPT that I put together that works reasonably well. If you scan that QR code, it's free. You can access it there. You just put your customer reviews in there, and it will do this analysis for you automatically. Here's an example. I'll show you just 2 slides to give you a flavor of the kind of things that you get from it. So I used the scrape reviews, and I only took 500. I gave it into that custom GPT, and the first thing it said to me is the desired outcomes. And this is the format in which it gives me. So from all these reviews, what do people want to achieve when they consider buying this thing? And then you could see it again. It's allergy symptoms. And if you look at the quotes, very specific, things like, I'm not sneezing anymore. The other one, this last one I show you, is anxieties. In other words, the questions that people had in their mind that almost put them off buying. You can see that skepticism. It sounded like the gimmick. And there are others as well. So that's the kind of insight that you get from reviews. So far we've got the Reddit and we've got reviews, and we're putting it all together, and it starts giving us a picture about that right side of the image that I started to talk out with. You know, what's going on in the mind and the heart of the user, which I believe is the real question. And then this is the last one before we go back to that page. This is a comment on Reddit, and I just grabbed it yesterday. I won't go through the entire comment, but it's representative of the kind of things you see on Reddit. And look at what, so they're at the point where they want to buy an air purifier, quiet, for the bedroom. They talk about allergies, about the bedroom size, the budget. So these are the things that are in the consumer mind. Already, I know everything that I need to know. I've not looked at heat maps. I've not looked at scroll maps. I've not looked at analytics. And you know what? I'm not going to. If a junior marketer comes into my office with a wireframe, a proposal, and they've got heat maps and scroll maps, I chase them out of the room. I say, go and do your work. Go and speak to customers. I don't care about your scroll maps. I don't care about your heat maps, because that's not what makes people buy. So let's go back to this page, the original page. And there's the copy on the right from that page. We're not going to read through all of it, but let's just look at what they say. Rapidly clean, 65 square meters in 7 stages of filtration removes, 999. I don't even, the next one, I don't even know what it means. Advanced odor removal, sure, I get that. Odor fence technology, what does that mean? Look on the left, which is the phrases, what consumers actually say. I don't wake up with a blocked nose every morning. There's less dust on the furniture, gets rid of smoke and paint odors. So the last thing, I'll wrap this up quickly. is we start with this objective at the top, increase conversion rate, and then we jump to conclusions. And what you should do instead is you should ask this question before you do anything else. What customer needs and pain points, if we solve them, would move this metric? So it's not the metric, it is the behavior of the consumer that, if we change that, will result in the metric looking different. And so here are the things that we've seen that we need to think through. And then it looks very different. So when you put all of that together, you'll come away with what's called custom opportunities. This framework is called the opportunity solution tree. And so at the top, you've got your conversion rate. Well, it could be RPV, it could be anything, whatever the thing is that you want to achieve. But it's the second layer is everything that you've heard from consumers. This is what we call customer opportunities. So one of them is customers don't know if this air purifier will work for their specific situation. If we fix that, we can expect the conversion rate to increase, but it's not moving buttons around the page, right? So here are some of the examples. And again, we'll skip over the details, but we saw everything that we saw from 5 minutes of research. The skepticism, it sounds too good to be true. On the right, we've got specific allergy symptoms. And now when we go back to this page, it looks very different, because now we say, here is some copy. The only thing we're changing, that headline, instead of saying, let me go back, instead of saying power filtration, advanced odor removal, we go, wake up breathing through your nose again. That's what a consumer said. In fact, several consumers spoke about that. So it's talking to the consumer in their words. Removes tiny particles in the air that trigger blocked nose, sneezing and coughing. That's what brings them here. There's nothing about sneezing, coughing, etc. in the copy here. But we know what's on the mind of consumer. And the last one, so quiet, it won't disturb your sleep. Even we saw how that's important. And then the kicker at the bottom. If you're not sure, you're still not sure, you're still not convinced. Well, why don't you try it in your home for 30 days? And if it doesn't work for you, you return it and we'll give you your money back. We're out of time. If you want to be in touch with me, and please, I welcome it. I'd love to meet some of you. Scan this QR code and let's connect on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. I will end it there.
Thank you, Johann. Thank you so much. I think we are going to send you a